I stumbled upon 3 terrifying true suburban horror stories that will haunt your dreams. I never should have opened that door. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday evening. The faint glow from my laptop screen lit up the room, casting long shadows across the walls. I was wrapped in my favorite blanket, feeling safe and secure in my little suburban haven. But then, a rustle came from the hallway. My heart raced, pulse quickening at the sound. The air grew colder, as if winter had barged in without warning. It sent chills down my spine. I squinted into the dim light, straining to see what lurked there. Darkness seemed to breathe, shifting around me. I could almost hear whispers, hushed and frantic, creeping closer. Objects in the room flickered in and out of focus, dancing with unseen energy. Was the lamp flickering? Or was it my imagination? Every small noise echoed like thunder. A drawer creaked, followed by the soft thud of something heavy hitting the floor. I gasped, gripping the blanket tighter. Should I go check? My feet felt like lead. Fear wrapping around me, squeezing tighter. The shadows danced with malevolence as I contemplated moving. And suddenly, in the corner of my eye, a figure. Just a flash. A silhouette lurking just beyond the threshold. My breath caught in my throat. It was there, silencing all the sounds around me. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat screaming at me to run. But I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, held captive by dread. Just then, a door slammed somewhere in the house, reverberating through the walls. The sound shattered the tranquility and fueled the terror burning in my chest. I felt a scream building within me, clawing to escape. And then, all at once, nothing. The lights flickered again, plunging me into a darkness thicker than before. What was that figure? Did I really see it? Or was the fear making me hallucinate? I could only wait and wonder as the room around me grew more sinister by the second. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence became deafening, an oppressive shroud enveloping me. I clutched the blanket tighter, its fabric scratching against my clammy skin. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to run, but the darkness held a hypnotic grip. I squinted again, forcing myself to believe my eyes could penetrate the blackness. Then, a soft whisper drifted through the room, growing clearer yet remaining unintelligible. It seemed to call to me, weaving through the air like a gentle breeze. I strained to hear, to understand what it wanted, but just as suddenly as it had come, the sound snapped shut like a door slamming in the night. Suddenly, I remembered the stories, the ones I had brushed off as mere folklore, tales of families that had vanished from this very neighborhood, their homes abandoned, yet their anguished cries echoing in these walls. I had laughed them off during book club, attributing them to paranoia, or worse, imagination. But here I was, trapped in a narrative crafted by someone else's fears. The air thickened, and a sound broke through. Steady, rhythmic thuds, as if something was making its way through the confines of the house. It echoed like the footsteps of a lost soul. My heart sank further as I slowly turned my head toward the sound, praying it was an illusion, just a trick of the mind. But in that moment, I felt a rush of cold air sweeping past me, followed by an unbearable heaviness settling like an anvil on my chest. The thud stopped, replaced by a soft scraping noise, as if something was dragging itself across the wooden floor. My eyes widened in horror as I felt the temperature drop even further, a bitter chill settling around my neck. I couldn't breathe. Panic twisted within me, a vine curling tightly around my throat, threatening to choke me. The scraping grew sharper, dragging closer. A mad thought crossed my mind. Mindy had to get up and confront it. I had to know what was unfolding in my own home, whatever it was that wanted my presence. With a frantic move, I rolled off the couch, hitting the floor with a muffled thud. I cringed, half expecting hands to reach out from the shadows and pull me under. But nothing. The room lay silent, eerily expectant. My breath came in sharp gasps as I crawled slowly toward the hallway, drawn by morbid curiosity. Those whispers returned, haunting melodies that spiraled around me and pulled me forward. Shadows writhed as if they had minds of their own, taunting me to step further into their domain. I reached the threshold of the hallway, and with my shaking hands, I brushed against the wall to support myself. The familiar texture of the paint seemed to pulsate beneath my fingers. Beyond the darkness loomed a faint light, flickering like a beacon. I hadn't turned on any lights. The house had succumbed to darkness after that door slammed. My instincts flooded with caution, screaming that I was walking into a trap. But the light drew me in, igniting a bizarre sense of hope. Maybe someone else was here, someone who could explain the nightmarish twists this innocent evening had taken. As I moved cautiously, I caught a glimpse of a silhouette figure that lurked just beyond the reach of the light, swaying side to side. My pulse quickened. Was it the same shadow I had seen before? Fear gripped my heart with icy fingers as I opened my mouth to call out, but nothing came out. A scream trapped by terror, and then the light blinked out, swallowed by darkness, leaving me utterly alone. I could barely make out the rising figure in the black void as it advanced toward me. The whispers turned to frenzied shouts, a chorus that filled my ears with madness. With a sudden, blinding flash of brilliance, the light flickered back on, casting stark illumination down the hallway. And there it was, a figure, no longer merely a shadow. Its gaunt face twisted in a grotesque expression, one that gleamed with hatred. Eyes bulging, lips curled back to reveal a jagged smile, filled with decay. Before my mind could process a plan, it opened its mouth wide, impossibly wide, and I couldn't help but step back. Into darkness, into a void that was hungry and waiting. And then, silence fell. I stumbled upon 3 terrifying true suburban horror stories that will haunt your dreams. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, a chasm of dread that swallowed every natural sound. The figure stood still, its grotesque visage frozen in a moment of sinister delight, and I felt an inexorable pull toward it, as if the shadows themselves were stitching my fate into its tapestry of despair. In that heart-stopping pause, I saw the glint of something metallic in its bony hand, wet with a darkness that could only be blood. My breath stilled, frozen in my throat, while the entity swayed gently, as if savoring my discomfort. I was not just witnessing horror, I was about to become part of it. The light flickered again, dimming closer to complete darkness, shadows fluttering like moss around its embrace. In the pale illumination, the figure looked less menacing by contrast to the engulfing black, but every instinct whirled within me, screaming against the numbing pattern of my mind. I had to move. I had to escape. I turned quickly, scanning the dimly lit hallway for an exit. My eyes fell on the kitchen at the far end, where the faint glow of the refrigerator offered a semblance of sufficient oasis amidst the storm. I could do it. Just a few more steps and I'd drown in the hum of everyday life. But the whispers burst forth again, louder, mocking, an insidious chorus that rattled my bones. "Stay, stay, stay!" they chanted, echoing as if they were the very walls of the house succumbing to the frenzy. They tugged at my will, binding me with their resonance, chains forged of venom and despair. With a surge of adrenaline, I squeezed my eyes shut against the cacophony and sprinted down the hallway, heart hammering against my ribcage like a wild thing. Every stride felt desperate, as if they alone could shatter the grip of fear that threatened to claw at my sanity. But just as I reached the kitchen door, An agonizing scream wrenched from my throat, and I stumbled into the room. The kitchen was drenched in an oppressive silence that crushed the breath from my lungs. The refrigerator loomed before me, its hum now a sinister growl, an echo from the abyss I had just fled. My mind flew back to the stories of the missing families, the ones swept into the depths of the night, never to return. I was flirtatiously close to joining their ranks, but as I leaned against the countertop, grasping for grounding, a sudden stench slithered up my nostrils, a pungent mix of iron and something ancient, a relic of death. The fridge was slightly ajar, its door seemingly inviting, and against my better judgment, I peered inside. What I saw made my stomach churn and riveted me to the spot. Instead of food, the shelves were lined with photographs, faces smiling in frozen agony, eyes wide in terror and entrapment. Their expressions seemed to shift, morphing from delight to sheer horror as I stared, aware on some primal level that these were the previous dwellers of this house, all trapped and gritting through the pain. I recoiled, my fingers brushing against something cold and wet. I looked down, only to find the same metallic object from before, a knife, crusted with rust and remnants of a human experience long lost. The sight sent a thrill of sheer terror cascading through me. His was more than abandoned life. It was a testament to the horrors that transpired within these walls. The whispers came suddenly, breaking through the mist of my thoughts. "Join us!" they hissed, hollow and desperate. My heart clenched as I felt something brush against my back, a chilling caress. I turned slowly, too slowly, only to find myself face to face with a shadow I recognized far too well. The figure hovered just beyond the threshold of the kitchen, its eyes glinting with a macabre hunger. It parted its grim lips, revealing rows of impossibly sharp teeth, and began taking deliberate steps forward, dragging one foot behind it as though it were bound. As darkness clawed at the edges of the light, and the air grew heavy with the scent of despair, I turned to retreat, rational thought lost in the throes of survival. But the kitchen was transformed now, walls shifting as if they revered the presence of the unspeakable, trapping me, leaving me in the grip of terror. But before I could act, I heard a sound that would shatter whatever remained of my fragile reality. A low, spine-chilling laugh emanated from the figure, vibrating through the air like a death knell. I stumbled backward, the knife slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor, and then, abruptly, the lights went out. Drowning in darkness, I felt the world collapse. The shrieks of those long gone echoed in my ears, replaced by a cacophony of frenzied screams. Then, between the cacophony, cutting through a razor-sharp volume, a final, chilling whisper came. "We're not alone anymore." As I standing there, paralyzed by terror, I felt something icy brush against my skin and a cold hand grip my shoulder. Panic surged through me, a primal instinct urging me to flee the nightmare that had enveloped me. Yet, the grip on my shoulder tightened, sending bolts of ice coursing through my veins. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, trapped beneath layers of paralyzing terror. The darkness morphed, thick and tangible, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. "Join us," a voice hissed, no longer just a whisper but a chorus of tortured souls merging into a cacophonous plea. The shadows began to swirl, forming twisted shapes that whispered of the past, the laughter of children, the frantic cries of mothers, the terror of fathers who knew they would not return home. The figure loomed closer, its grotesque features almost touching mine. I could feel the cold emanating from its body, seeping into me like poison. My heart raced, each hammering beat echoing in the emptiness, a deafening drumroll heralding my doom. I instinctively shoved it away, desperation lending strength to my movement, and stumbled backward into the abyss of the kitchen. Suddenly, a flicker of light burst into existence, illuminating the scene before me in a cold, unforgiving glow. The kitchen had changed once more. It expanded, stretching into an endless void where the walls melted away into the darkness, revealing a haunting tableau of memories long buried. Faces twisted in agony surrounded me, their eyes pleading, mouths open in silent screams. I fell to my knees, the cold floor biting into my skin, and clenched my eyes shut against the horror. The metallic tang of blood hung thick in the air. I could still feel the icy grip of the figure at my back, its breath chilling me to the core. The haunting laughter pulsed through the air like a macabre melody, taunting my every thought. Despair completed its suffocating embrace as I opened my eyes again, hesitantly gazing into the void, where shadows formed writhing shapes, desperate to materialize as something more tangible, more horrific. They seemed to pulse with a life of their own, a living entity birthed from the dread that thrived in every dark corner of the house. "Help us," a voice came, low and gravelly, differing from the others. Each word dripped with pain and longing, twisting through the air with a bitter sweetness. It pierced through my veil of fear, creating an unsettling curiosity. "You don't belong here," it continued, while the shadows shifted closer, as if sensing the vulnerability of my spirit. My breaths quickened, my body trembled. What had possessed me to enter this house, this tomb of lost lives? I could sense a danger lurking deeper within the shadows that clung desperately to the corners of reality. And then it hit me: the very act of running, escaping, was what they craved. I tried to rise, to flee, but the floor seemed to stretch under my weight, warping and shifting as if the house itself was in on this twisted game. I could still feel the entities nearby, hovering, waiting as if I were the final offering to their insatiable hunger. An icy whisper snaked its way to my ear: "We just want to play." The voice of a child this time, innocent yet chilling, a striking dissonance to its morbid imitation. The laughter bubbled up again, echoing off the walls that were not walls at all, but rather the memories of horrified souls, trapped in an eternal loop of their last moments. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, something flickered. A doorway manifested in the haze of shadow, pulsating brightly, a silvery escape beckoning me. Could it lead me away from the nightmare? Could it be my salvation? Or was it a trap laid by the very darkness I wished to escape? With one last glance over my shoulder, I saw the figure, the hunger in its eyes more vivid than ever, sharper than the knife still laying forgotten on the floor. It stepped forward, and the kitchen walls tightened around me, an embrace of demise that buried me in its suffocating grip. I sprinted toward the shimmering doorway, heart battling against the bleak profusion of shadows and cries. As I dashed forward, I could feel fingers grasping at my ankles, pulling me down toward an abyss, whispering promises of eternal rest, a promise I refused to accept. Just as I reached the threshold, something cold brushed against my wrist, yanking me back, halting my escape. I felt the fabric of my being stretch thin as I hung in the balance. "Join us," the chorus surged louder, a torrent of despair surging forth, echoing in my ear like the toll of a bell resigned to judgment. But before I could scream for help, the last flicker of light flickered out, plunging me back into the depths of terror, and I was engulfed, the joyous laughter now a cacophony of despair, a haunting crescendo that signaled the end of my fight. And then the darkness was pierced by a single voice: "You've made the choice." My heart dropped as I heard footsteps marching toward me, relentless and fierce, and I braced myself for what was to come, knowing in the very core of my being that none would emerge from the shadows unscathed. The echoes of the last whisper reverberated within the void, a taunting reminder of the choice I had unwittingly made. Flashes of light speared through the darkness, illuminating my surroundings in fits and starts, revealing fleeting glimpses of the horror that surrounded me. Dark figures danced just outside my field of vision, their outlines shivering in an unholy rhythm, teasing my sanity. I couldn't tell where I ended and the shadows began, becoming one with the very nightmares that pursued me. Then came the footsteps. A cacophony of weighty thuds pierced through the morose solitude, resonating nearer with each heartbeat. They weren't merely footsteps. They were the sound of something powerful, something primal. As I inched backward, I collided with something solid and unyielding, an unseen barrier embodied by fear, holding me captive against the encroaching void. "Don't be afraid," A sultry voice slithered through the dark, dripping with mockery. It was a linguist of despair, wrapping around me like a shroud. "You belong with us, sweet child." My blood turned to ice, and I struggled to form words to counter this deceiving tide that sought to drown me. "I don't want to be a part of anything," I choked out, each syllable thick with terror. Laughter erupted, cruel and melodic, tearing through the oppressive silence. The shadows deepened and writhed, pulling me closer as if inviting me to dance, yet it was a dance of doom, a baleful waltz where the outcome was never in my favor. From the depths of the darkness emerged a figure. The contours were indistinct, save for the glimmer of crimson eyes that glowed like embers in a dying fire, fixated on me with an unsettling hunger. As it stepped into the flickering moonlight, I recognized remnants of human features distorted and stretched, melding into a macabre visage that was hauntingly familiar. My heart raced as I recalled the faces of the missing children from the town stories, their eyes now mirroring the very despair and rage I felt. "You've seen us," it accused, the voice chillingly akin to the ones I had heard in dreams, a warped echo of voices trapped in that insurmountable darkness. "You could have saved us." I stammered, overtaken by remorse, my instincts clawing for escape. The figure leaned closer, their breath a foul miasma that engulfed me, enveloping me with the weight of their ethereal sorrow. "Then come and join us." The words slithered through the air, leaving an icy trail that coiled around my throat like a noose, perpetually drawing tighter. The laughter swelled into a din, nearly drowning out my thoughts, and within that crescendo, a shiver of realization coursed through me. These weren't mere spirits seeking solace. They were a collection of the forgotten, those who had lain dormant until the cycle of despair gave them form. They were each anchored to the memories of those they lost, and I had unwittingly become the tether. The ground trembled beneath me, and I stumbled, barely catching myself before plunging into whatever abyss beckoned. I glanced back toward the doorway, now fading like a mirage, ever elusive, while the shrill harmony of taunts ensnared my senses. A piercing scream shattered my resolve, a mix of agony and longing. "You think you can leave?" It was a new voice, deeper, resonating through the wood and stone of the house itself, echoing the beating of my heart. "You think you can escape?" I turned. It was the parent of the child whose laughter I had heard moments before, their face contorted in rage and despair, a harbinger of violence desperate to reclaim its lost kin. The figure lunged at me, yet the shadows coalesced, binding them within a dark tapestry woven from lives sacrificed. In that moment, clarity washed over me. I was a vessel, a pawn in a game far larger than I could fathom. Their cries began merging into a singular demand, an insatiable plea for redemption, revenge, and eternal presence, all twisted within the shadows of the vanishing doorway. The shrieking crescendo reached an excruciating climax, forcing me forward despite my every instinct urging me to retreat. My pulse thundered in unison with the echoes, and I felt my reality twisting, warping. The ground quaked beneath my feet, engulfing me in a tide of malevolence. Then, just as my foot crossed the threshold toward the fading doorway, a sudden sharp pain pierced my wrist. The cold grasp I had felt before returned, now clutching with an agonizing ferocity, yanking me backward into the depths of darkness. "Stay with us," a chorus implored, the laughter morphing into dissonant wails, a symphony of despair that drummed in my ears with an unbearable intensity. As the chilling tendrils of despair wrapped around me, constraining my escape, I glanced back through the fading light. One desperate thought crystallizing in my mind, one desperate hope. There lingered a possibility of change, a flicker of resistance burning against the suffocating dark. Then the laughter subsided, and a single shadowy figure detached itself from the mass of despair, stepping forward with a glimmer in its eyes. It didn't lead with pleas, like the others. It was silent, calculating, and it whispered with a voice that left no room for denial. "Only one can join us. Choose wisely." Cold dread engulfed me as panic took hold. I felt a veil of darkness shroud my vision, and behind the entity, the other shadows stirred with a fervent hunger. I realized the real horror awaited not just in their demand for me to stay but in the choice I never anticipated having to make. As I stared into the abyss, the air thickened, and I knew that one way or another, someone would have to pay the price. And then, the ground shifted, the darkness rippling like water, and the faces of the lost began to merge, forming one horrific vis-a-vis reflection of my own terrified face. I was losing myself, becoming consumed by the very darkness I feared, and as the last flicker of hope slipped away, I was left with a choice. To save myself or condemn another. The ground vanished beneath me, and I fell into the depths, no longer certain of which path would lead to salvation, or if I would recognize anything at all when I landed. The fall seemed eternal, a spiraling descent through the thick cloak of despair. My body felt weightless yet burdened by the relentless pull of the shadows, as they whispered sweet nothings, promising sanctuary deep within their folds. I gasped for air, my lungs filling with tangible darkness, each inhale tasting of regret, sorrow, and an impending doom. Suddenly, I collided with something cold and unyielding, my body unceremoniously crashing onto a damp surface that sucked the warmth from my skin. The air around me buzzed with unease, filled with muted echoes of past horrors. The oppressive stench of decay clung to the very fabric of the place, twisting my stomach in knots. I pressed my palms against the ground, cold, gritty, familiar. With great effort, I pushed myself upright, only to be met by the stifling darkness that surrounded me. I fumbled for some semblance of direction, my heart hammering against my ribcage as the shadows danced eagerly at the corners of my vision. Every instinct told me to flee, yet the weight of the silence was so profound, it felt as though the very fabric of the air thickened with an unseen presence. Slowly, a feeble light began to coalesce nearby, flickering like the last pulse of a dying star. Shadows flickered in response, twisting into grotesque shapes, their whispers rising in anticipation. I reached the sour sail alone, dusty lantern propped precariously atop a crumbling stone pedestal, casting eerie shapes that slid across the walls, like phantoms in the night. As I reached out for it, the whispers grew louder, their tactile urgency brushing against my mind. Light it, they urged, and a part of me felt compelled to obey their siren call. I struck a match, and the flame sputtered to life, illuminating the surroundings with a dim glow. The shadows retreated slightly, as though they feared the light. A brief moment of triumph extinguished by the onslaught of dread that shadowed my heart. The room was a twisted gallery of horrors, filled with tattered portraits of spectral figures, each one bearing witness to tormented memory etched in the canvas of despair. Their eyes followed me, brimming with a mournful knowledge, and the ache of their collective loss tugged at my very core. Among them, a child's face caught my attention, strikingly familiar. The resemblance sent a jolt of recognition through me. My heart raced as I felt drawn to the chilling smile that mocked my very soul. A child I had played with once, lost to the darkness long before my arrival. The atmosphere thickened, and I could almost hear the edges of her laughter falling away into silence, her essence trapped forever within this purgatory. Just like the others, a voice murmured from behind me, sharp and brittle. I spun around, the lantern light flickering wildly in the sudden draft. Before me stood the figure of a woman, gaunt and ghostlike, her clothes hanging limply from her skeletal frame. While her features were obscured, the outlines of despair radiated from her, the echoes of her sadness reverberating through the air. "Join them," she urged, her voice a raspy whisper soaked in sorrow. "Each face here is a piece of the puzzle, and it is not complete without you." "Why?" I stammered, the terror rolling in waves. I searched her gaze, but all I saw was an abyss, as profound as my own, swirling with memories of rejection and abandonment. "What do you want from me? Your existence made them suffer. Now their pain craves to pull you back into the place their souls linger," she replied, and the shadows shifted with a resonant sigh. Before I could respond, the lantern flickered violently, and the whispers crescendoed into a symphony of despair, pleading and jarring. Painful visions flooded my mind, scenes of the children's lives, their laughter now tarnished by the grim shadows that wrapped around their past. The darkness thickened, and I could feel its pull coiling around my limbs, anchoring me to the spot. I held the lantern out, the flame barely illuminating the encroaching veil of despair, but it felt like a flimsy shield against the weight of collective grief pressing upon me. The woman stepped closer, her features sharpening under the waning light. "You can save them," she chanted, her voice weaving a web of temptation around my will. "They need you to choose, and only then will they be free. What does it matter?" I shouted, anguish breaking free from the depths of my chest. "They're gone! I can't bring them back!" The shadows surged forward, a tempest of anguished cries merging into a single echo that tore at the edges of my sanity. "You think escape is possible?" The voice of the forgotten children merged with the fabric of my reality. "Your soul is the anchor, the choice you are to make ripples through eternity. But choose wrong, and be lost to us forever." Before I could comprehend their words fully, the ground beneath me trembled and cracked, dividing the room into swirling patches of light and dark. The lantern sputtered, and I felt my reality fraying, the walls bending at the seams, pulsing like a living entity brimming with despair. "Choose now," the specter implored, her eyes wide with desperation. "Choose the one to save, or watch as the others fade away into nothingness. One will remain, one will be free." The lantern flickered violently, about to extinguish in that moment. The horror unfolded as I realized, with dawning terror, that beneath my feet began to writhe what I could barely comprehend, a gaping maw of darkness, an endless abyss longing to engulf everything in its path. And with the last flicker of light, my decision loomed before me, casting a chilling shadow across the flickering remnants of humanity, all while the dark mouth yawned wider, hungry for the choice I had yet to make. The moment of decision burrowed into my spine like an ice-cold needle, as the abyss writhed with a palpable hunger. Shadows swam around me in a chaotic dance, every inch of the stone floor vibrating with the collective despair of countless souls bound to their fate. With the faintest glimmers of sanity flickering in my consciousness like the dying flame of the lantern, I was swept into a maelstrom of memories, each child a tether, each face a reflection of my own deep regrets. "Choose!" the woman shrieked, her fragile form distorting in the chaos, transforming into a tempest of anger and grief. "Let one be free. You have their lives in your hands." My heart raced. I looked desperately into the swirling chaos, each child's face contorting under the weight of their wishes. They were ghosts, yes, but they clung to time like barnacles on a rotting ship, each one whispering sweet promises of liberation that intertwined with their agonizing cries. "Make it end!" a voice pleaded, an echo of innocence witching through clenched teeth. "You have to save me." I fell deeper into the vortex, visions of their once bright lives flooding my mind. A beautiful girl with ribbons in her hair begged as tears streamed down her ash-colored cheeks, pleading for the chance to run through sun-drenched fields again. A boy with wild, unkempt hair reached out, his hand dripping anguish like rainwater from a frozen branch. He wanted nothing more than to escape the oppressive weight of suffocating silence. It was impossible to choose. Laughter turned into screams, joy into haunting echoes. The risk of losing them all paralyzed my heart, while the shadows lurked hungrily around the edges of the room, a blackened storm awaiting the moment I slipped out. "I can't do this," I yelled, desperation clawing at my throat. "I can't choose one life over another. They all deserve their freedom. Then they'll drown within the abyss," the woman hissed, her voice dropping to an eerie whisper that sliced the air like icy shards. The shadows tightened their grip, my breath coming in ragged gasps, as my body remained frozen. "What will it be?" the lantern sputtered as a gust of cold, damp air surged through the chamber, wrenching the light from my hands and plunging me back into darkness. I struggled against the overwhelming dread enveloping me, the sinister whispers forming a symphony of twisted promises. It was a deluge of guilt, betrayal, and anguish swirling within me as emotions collided. I stumbled backward, bumping against the damp stone wall behind me. My heart pounded, and I struggled to marshal my strength against the omnipresent torment. The darkness was alive, feeding off my weakness, my indecision. I felt something rush past me, an ephemeral whisper that dissuaded the instinct to flee. "Help us," it begged. "Help us all." In that instant, the shadows grew more aggressive, reaching for me like talons made of night, desperate for my consent. Above the cacophony of whispered anguish, a sudden clarity struck me. Their faces, each child had moments of their lives stolen from them. I had to see them. I needed to know their stories. With desperation surging within my chest, I grasped the idea and molded it into a fragile beacon. "Let me hear their stories," I shouted defiantly, my voice battling the encroaching fear. "Let me know what they lived for. Maybe, just maybe, that could save them." The shadows hesitated, recoiling as if struck. Silence fell, charging the air with a deafening tension. And then, as if in response to my plea, the portraits around me began to shimmer and vibrate, warping reality into echoes of the past. My surroundings convulsed, swirling into scenes of their last moments, a kaleidoscope of joy and despair. The girl with ribbons spun around a sun-flecked garden, her laughter a euphoric melody. The boy raced through a cavernous amusement park, adrenaline coursing through him as his heart soared. Each vision, each scene was a little piece of their humanity, raw and essential, but it's too late for them. The woman's rage crescendoed, cutting through the vivid snippets that invigilated my mind. The flickering light returned, and I felt its warmth amid the chaotic shadows, a balm for my troubled spirit. "You want their stories? Watch as they perish in the darkness again." Suddenly, the portraits morphed into frantic desperation. Cries of help intertwined with shrieks of despair echoed through the chamber. The very walls seemed to close in, the pulse of the abyss drumming a frantic beat against my soul. I could feel the weight of their suffering pressing down upon me, a vice-like grip tightening with each heartbeat. In that haunting instant, my eyes locked onto the figure of the girl with ribbons standing on the precipice of the darkness, her eyes wide with pleading hope that transformed into sheer terror. She pointed at something behind me, her mouth forming a scream that never escaped her lips. A cold finger of horror danced down my spine as I felt something unfathomable emerging from the Shadowsa figure, more monstrous than any nightmare could conjure. Towering, slick with shadows, it bore a face that gloated morbidly, etched with the stories of my failures. I had wanted the stories. Now, they clawed their way toward me, desperate for release, their final cries almost human. And as the shrieking cacophony rose to a deafening roar, the abomination reached for me, its grotesque maw yawning wider than infinity, carrying with it the promise of oblivion. With the knowing twist of fate, I understood, whatever choice I made, the weight of darkness would corrupt it. The children, their suffering, and the very essence of freedom hung in the balance. Finally, I was faced not just with the choice of whom to save, but the horrific realization that none could escape this eternal horror. The shadows mingled and writhed around me, no longer just seeking to claim the children, but me as well. And then, just as the shadows cascaded over me, as my own scream tore through the choking air, I realized it was not my choice that mattered at all, but who would remain behind to face the unthinkable deeper within the abyss. As the darkness consumed my vision, I barely caught a glimpse of the figure of the woman, now smiling with a haunting certainty, and through the ever-thickening dread, she whispered the last words I would hear. The choice was never yours to make. In that anticipation of dread, I felt my reality fracture, the last flicker of light swallowed whole, leaving an unwholesome nothingness swirling beneath. In the thickening pool of abyss, where time had lost all meaning and hope withered like autumn leaves clinging to a dying branch, I surrendered to the silence. The weight of the dark maw pressing upon me felt like my own heartbeat thrumming at a deadly pace. It was not just the children's lives hanging in the balance anymore. It dripped from my very essence, potent and pulsing. Suddenly, the shadows began to shift and swirl with insidious purpose. I thought I would be enveloped into oblivion, but instead, the darkness twisted and reformed, as though presenting me with a glimpse of what lay beyond. And in that moment of awakening, the nightmares of other forgotten souls echoed around me, a moaning chorus of eternal suffering. In the ethereal vastness, I caught sight of silhouettes, their outlines woven from shadows much thicker than mere darkness, lost souls coiling desperately, their faces contorted in silent agony. It struck me then that I was not the first to wander into this malevolent realm, but merely the latest offering in a parade of torment. The horror sank into me, almost coalescing into an unholy understanding. Everyone who had ever entered this abyss had chosen to linger, drawn into the insatiable hunger of the shadows. Do you see them? The woman's voice vibrated through the haze, now sweet and soothing, laced with sickening mockery. They too once believed they could alter the story. They thought their compassion could save them. Yet look how ruthlessly the void consumes hope. I shuddered as her words wrapped themselves around me, inviting and suffocating. The faces glowed faintly, spectral whispers of their former selves illuminating the twisted bonds of despair they shared with my own plight. A figure emerged from this ethereal tapestry, an emaciated little boy, his form quivering as he staggered toward me through the encroaching void. "They wanted to play," he murmured, his voice thin like gossamer threads. "They only wanted to be free, like me." My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as the boy stretched a frail hand toward me, his eyes wide and shimmering with yearning. "If we come together, we can escape this. Help us." A surge of emotion ripped through me. His innocence beckoned like a distant star, tempting me to reach out. My mind raced, grappling with the unfathomable choice I stood before. I had been faced with horror and desolation, yet this boy's tremulous voice rang with glimmers of hope in defiance of the chilling fate looming over us. No. "They are lost," the woman hissed, her shadow emanating with an ominous aura that prickled my skin. "They can't escape the darkness. You'll become one of them. Do you want to join their woeful cries?" Considering the weight of her words, I felt my will falter. I glimpsed the outstretched hand wavering before me, the desperate plea of the boy morphing into another echo of the lost. The darkness deepened, tightening its grip around both the boy and the flickering remnants of my resolve, yet it also creaked as if revealing hidden openings. It was then their stories engulfed me, each one an agonizing tale illuminating the hollowness of their existence. The child from the amusement park, the girl in the garden, and new echoes I hadn't detected before all surged through me in overlapping memories, longing stifled by despair, laughter turning into screams echoing forever in this grotesque wasteland. Then, suddenly, the shadows trembled, and the shrieks of the souls surrounding us escalated like thunder rolling through a desolate sky, merging into a deafening revelation. The voices began to coalesce, forming a discordant choir that unmasked the true horror resting below a gnashing of teeth and drawn-out howls, a cacophony laced with vengeance. "Join us!" they screamed in unison, a dozen souls clawing at the boundaries of existence, trying to latch onto the threads of my spirit. "We are stronger together. You can reclaim what remains." Beneath the harrowing turn of events, the woman's laughter reverberated through the shadows, monstrous and endless. "Foolish child. Pulling them together only deepens your suffering. You do not have the luxury of choice." Her voice throbbed through me, rooting me where I stood, unable to retreat from the chaos. The shadows shifted once more, snaking through the emptiness like dark streams of a dreadful river, forcing their dread into the recesses of every decision I had ever made. I could feel my resolve crumbling like brittle glass, clarity shattering against the walls of despair. "Make a choice, one last time," the woman demanded, her voice growing richer, twisted with anticipation. "Save yourself or save them." Before I could respond, the boundaries of reality trembled. A surge of energy pulsed through the air as the primordial reflection of the abyss writhed around me, and I suddenly felt yanked back. The children's voices faded, distorted and fading, their last cry of blurring shadows slipping through a crack in the dark. And then, before my eyes, the woman vanished, swallowed by the consuming darkness, leaving me alone with the children, their faces eager but marred by despair. In the heart of the tempest, I felt that if I hesitated even for a moment, I too would be consumed by the depths. As their piercing eyes fixed upon me, I understood too late what was unraveling. The stories I so desperately sought were being torn from the seams of reality. "Please, help us!" they chorused, a rising crescendo of muted cries desperate for reprieve yet intertwined with the shadows that sought to entrap me as well. But before I could gather the threads of my resolve to act, the essence of the abyss surged once more. Shot through with pinpricks of icy dread, I was left to ponder the very fabric of existence. In an instant, another figure appeared behind me, a boy, painted in shadow yet radiating a flicker of light. The tether between both realms stretched thin, and as I spun to face this last semblance of hope, my breath caught sharply in my throat. For the boy's face was eerily familiar, a chilling echo from my own childhood, a ghostly reflection of my very soul. "Don't abandon me," he whispered, and time fractured again, leaving me wondering whether I was destined to save the lost or face the darkness within myself. The darkness continued to thrum as I stood teetering on the precipice of despair and revelation, my own visage illuminated in the boy's haunting eyes. An amalgamation of dread coiled around me, squeezing tighter with each agonizing second. The air grew heavier, and the very essence of the abyss leaned in closer, eager to engulf me wholly. "Why are you here?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice quaking with uncertainty. "Why do you seek me?" The boy's eyes widened with desperation. "Because you know the way out. You just need to remember." Before I could fathom his meaning, a distant roar reverberated through the dark, setting the shadows into a furious dance. The anguished cries of the other souls surged into frenzy, their muffled screams morphing into a backdrop of chaos. I could feel their despair pulling at the frayed edges of my sanity. "Stay with us," they shouted simultaneously, their voices a profound lament, as if the shadows themselves were alive. "Let the darkness in. Only then can you be free. No," I protested, the word echoing in defiance against my gnawing fear. But even as I rejected their plea, a warmth began to emanate from the boy beside me, the flicker of light sparking a strange sense of familiarity. "Don't you see?" he insisted, his small frame illuminating the shadows around him. "This place feeds on your fear. Embrace it. If you confront your heartache, you can resist the darkness." His words sunk into me like stone, heavy and laden with memories I had long buried. I felt the sharp edges of my past push through, a father's voice raised in anger, the dull thud of disappointment when I could never measure up, and the cold expressions of those I had failed to protect. They hung in the air around us, eerie echoes intertwining with the surround, whispering sentences half-formed yet chillingly vivid. "You are stronger than this," the boy continued. "We were given a chance to escape the pain and regret that bind us. But you must decide what is worth saving." With that, the other silhouettes pressed in closer, their breath cold upon my neck, seeping from the void. Faces faded in and out, each representing a fragment of fear I thought I had overcome, but here they were, vestiges of my former self, woven seamlessly into my present. "Be one with us. Choose the oblivion." The chorus sang out, the shadows writhing in delight, igniting visions of comfort in their eternal embrace. Each lost soul's cry wrapped around my resolve with invisible chains, tugging me toward the depths. "No!" I screamed, stepping back. The boy beside me faltered, wavering amidst the gathering shadows. His flicker dulled, the light in his eyes struggling against the oppressive weight of the dark. "You don't have to listen to them." In that moment, chaos erupted. The shadows surged, vibrating violently as tendrils coalesced, reaching for me like skeletal hands clawing from a grave. They roared with wrath, drawing in the echoing desperation of 1,000 mournful souls. "Join us," they implored, their combined breath rushing into my lungs. You cannot fight what is meant to be. As they surged closer, desolation pulsed within the air. Thunderous footfalls reverberated just beyond my Visiona presence, both ominous and commanding. Something was awakening beneath the surface. A real puppet master of the abyss was soon to emerge. Close your eyes. The boy's command, desperate and sharp, sliced through the growing storm of whispers. Trust your heart. It knows the way. I clenched my fists, pressed against the clamor of haunting cries and madness swirling around me, yet the boy's otherworldly light beckoned. I could feel the darkness pressing in, an ever-tightening noose that threatened to strangle my very spirit. Was this how it felt to teeter on the brink? Would I fade away into the chaos or step toward the flicker of tenacity that lingered? Just one step, the boy urged. Follow my light. But the abyss, enraged at my hesitation, howled anew, unleashing a wave of chilling wind. The shadows recoiled slightly at the boy's luminescence, but with a suffocating collective will, they lunged once more. In doing so, they revealed something deep within the restless specter of a creature, half-formed and dripping with malice, reading my senses in dread. It was a figure unlike the others, for it belonged neither to the shadows nor the light. It leaned out from the whirlpool of the void, elongated limbs, and twisted features coiling like smoke, its face obscured but carrying a grin wide enough to consume the world. Do you wish to play? It crooned, a sound that reverberated throughout my marrow, seductive yet sinister, promising a chaotic dance with the revelations of my deepest fears. As the shadows shrieked with a cacophony of loss and longing for unity, my heart raced, the very fabric of my being trembling against the impending darkness, caught between the instincts of flight or the allure of a lure. And as I opened my mouth to answer, the abyss smothered my voice with a suffocating haze, amplifying the silence until it felt as though the world held its breath. Then, with a jolt, the boy flickered, vanishing into flickers of light, and I stood alone once more, faced with the swirling void and the ink-black figure emanating an unearthly silence, at the very edge where hope and despair whispered their final breaths. In that moment, clarity exploded within, and I was left breathless, shuddering at the realization. The decision I had to make was not simply about the children, but about myself. How much darkness was I willing to embrace in order to uncover the truth lurking beyond the abyss? And just before I could find the answer, the very ground beneath me cracked, splintering into yawning chasms as the shadows erupted, looming high, threatening to swallow me whole. I drifted in a haze of fear, my heart a chaotic drum echoing within the enclosure of the abyss. The children's faces blurred into the darkness, their pleading expressions morphing into echoes of my own fears. Time lost all meaning, moments stretched into eternities, interlaced with blinding panic. I stood at the flooded edge of the abyss, teetering between the tender glow of hope and the gaping maw of despair that hungered for my submission. The shadow coiled tighter around me, rising in response to my faltering resolve. From its depths erupted the boy's familiar face, spectral but radiant, a beacon defying the creeping shadows that nudged against my consciousness. I fought against the slick tendrils of despair that wanted to drag me back. "You can save us," he begged, a hollowness palpable in his tone. But his plea felt like a tether to my heart, stretched thin and quaking, about to snap between the promise of his glow and the darkness looming behind each flicker. I gasped. "I don't know how, that's the key," he insisted, his voice morphing into a haunting echo. "Your story is ours. Find what it takes to bring forth the truth. That's how you shatter this cycle." The shadow shuddered, trying to dismiss the boy, but he stood resolute, and slowly a path unfurled within the chaos, revealing a gallery of memories intertwined with echoes of every soul trapped within this horrific cycle. I hesitated, but I felt a surge of courage rush through me, igniting the desire to liberate not only them, but also myself. I had built walls around my heart, fortified by the weight of guilt and regret, fearing the reckoning of my past that intertwined all our fates, eternally unfulfilled by the choices I had failed to make. I see you, I shouted into the churning shadows. I won't let you take me. The shadows wailed, vibrating with rage as they clung to me, pulling me into the familiar darkness that promised to dissolve my past, yet I pushed against it, wildly throwing my hands until, with an agonized scream, the light surged between us, illuminating each tear, each loss, and each moment I had let slip through my fingers. As the murky memories crystallized into vivid clarity, despair evolved into understanding. I glimpsed the children's lives one by one, their laughter, their hopes, their dreams. I wept for them. I wept for me. Each face etched a tale that fed into this circle of sorrow from joy to grief, stretching through forgotten dreams. I saw their intertwined destinies with mine, carving out a reality, with every decision echoing through the twisted paths of our souls. And then came the final hammer to my heart. How my inaction had woven their fates into this shameful tapestry. I choose to remember. I screamed, causing the darkness to tremble and recoil. I choose to bear their stories, to let their light awaken in the night. As my declaration ripped through the chaos, the shadows shrieked and squirmed, shifting like a rushing tidal wave in reaction to the truth released from my soul. The air crackled, electrified by my resolution. Memories surged forth, visions colliding like cubic fragments pouring into one solid construct, throwing back the veil of despair clouding my vision. The shadows howled in fury, a tempest of anger, yet the boy beside me thrummed brightly. Yes! Keep going! We are not lost. The darkness felt terrifyingly alive, yet I emerged from its choking embrace. I saw through the swirling maelstrom of shadows. Their anguished forms were beginning to fragment, faces emerging only to be torn asunder again by the pulse of darkness. But then, amidst the swirling chaos, shadows stirred and coalesced into the ghostly forms of the children. Their solidifying shapes glinted with hope as they gazed up at me, eyes alive with possibility. In unity with my confession, their voices weave together. From the depths of despair, our stories rise like daylight to crack through the horror. The ground trembled beneath us, shadows crashing against the flames of collected hope. Yet I held firm against the encroaching waves. I felt an overwhelming power surge within, a collective drive from all that had battled through time and grief. Together, we moved as one shot of light, my heart echoing with theirs, and as I stepped forward, a shift cracked the abyss open. We are capable of more than this darkness. With each step I took, I felt the shadows shrink and quiver, their formations trembling under our united defiance. Our stories will live. Each voice resounded through the dark expanse, grounding me against the sinister pulse threatening our resolve. But then, that horrible figure reappeared, the embodiment of despair, its mouth curling into a grotesque grin as darkness surged back, more violent than before. You think you can break free? It hissed, clawing at the edges of my sanity. There are sacrifices yet to be made. Will you let them pay the price for your defiance? My heart raced, and I turned to the children. My resolve flickered like a candle. No! I wouldn't allow their stories to perish again. No! I shouted, forced against the confines of truth and fear. You don't own us. And as the sheer weight of the darkness tried to crush our spirit, the children pushed through, a luminous wave of light washing over me. As the shadows collapsed under our shared hope, every scream vanished, the desire for vengeance swallowed by courage. Then came a flash, my heart unraveled, capturing the bittersweet beauty of their lives, and just as suddenly, the darkness shattered, walls opened up, and colors exploded into life. Joy and grief coalesced into a harmonious crescendo that reverberated through existence, binding us together and sending the shadows reeling back. I saw the spectrum of lives once torn apart. I glimpsed the joy restored. Then realization crashed anew. Each child surrounded me, their eyes bright with a promise. We are free. We are not trapped. Yet, From the receding shadows surged the figure, now distorted, screaming with the fury of angered lost souls. As it lunged toward me, I understood the horrifying truth. It was never about them leaving or losing. It was about confronting my own darkness and the cyclical toll of passing without resolution. It was a monster stretching beyond our lives. And with one last ear-piercing scream, the figure melted away as the dawn broke through, casting shadows across the walls. Each child faded, leaving behind an echo of hope, fragments of their stories refracted in the emerging light. But deep within, darkness lingered, retreating yet palpable. Unseen specters danced in corners of my vision, their whispers becoming a distant reminder. The realization settled in my bones. Though the immediate battle was won, remnants of the shadows still lurked, ready to pull others into the rift. The horror lurked beneath, bound tightly in the fabric of our reality, transcending cycles, waiting and craving to return. As the first rays of a new dawn kissed the earth, I looked back over my shoulder, knowing full well the shadows would linger in the corners of our collective existence, whispering, sprouting in silent recall, to entice the unsuspecting, urging them to step into the haunting void. And in my heart, a chilling echo remained. The victory felt fleeting, overshadowed by the truth that neither innocence nor despair truly vanished. They lingered like an unfinished prologue, etched in the story of us all. Once touched, darkness never truly leaves, I whispered into the dawning light, feeling the shadows shift beyond my sight.